Scott, I ignore everyone I can, bro. I ignore everyone I can. You haven't been taking much of a break from your bullshit lately. That's the issue. You've been you've been just jamming it down our throats over and over again. I ignore everyone I can, bruh. I don't like doing this nearly as much as you think I do. If you make one that's even slightly ignorable, I'm ignoring it. However, this is the one where you've got your foot in your mouth and you're talking about stuff that is you don't know what you're talking about, and it's so obvious what is wrong with this video. But you have people like defending it, and oh god, you and your fans, but I swear, okay, let's do it again. At least this one's 6 minutes, so this shouldn't go over 20. Let's can't balance Dead by Daylight around the top 1%. Okay, the very, very first thing that we need to go into here is I am done with the term top 1%. I'm absolutely done with it. Absolutely done with it. Because the top 1% is the easiest way to convey the idea of high-level balance. You know, it comes from other games. Because usually in other games, you have to be part of the top 1% to really, like, exploit the balance issues in it. However, that's one of the things that's not the case in Dead by Daylight. You don't need a top 1% team to beat the Trickster. You don't need a top 1% to beat Myers. You don't need a top 1% to beat Legion. You just don't need top 1% teams to exploit the bad character design and the horrendously broken design of the survivors in this game. You don't need that. You absolutely do not need top 1% teams to exploit the balance issues. You need them for some characters. You do. Like, you need top 1% to beat some characters, but not even half the characters in the game. Most characters in Dead by Daylight can be beaten by a competent player. Top 40%. You can probably beat an A- tier with a top 25-30% player. Okay? You probably could do that. You really honestly could. If Thazer's group of solos can beat Otsa Spirit, the top 1% is a very bad term for this game. So we really should stop saying it. We need to, like, replace it with something that's, like, high caliber teams. I think that's what True says, right? High caliber. So, like you have to, like, start feeding that term out, because the top 1% makes it sound small, makes the issue sound small, and they're just absolutely not. But anyway, enough dilly-dally. That's just the first thing wrong with the core concept. Let's go. Let's listen to Scoot.
Hey guys, Scott here. It's 4 in the morning. I just had this thought in bed, and I got out of bed to record this, so forgive.
I want to get away from Jen Denise too, bro. But I'd want to do that too. But 4 in the morning, the idea certainly shows. It certainly shows how bad it is.
If I'm jumbling words and stuff like that, it's very late. But I think I have proof that you can't actually balance Dead by Daylight.
You have proof at 4 a.m. 4 a.m. You just roll out of bed and you have proof. Oh boy, that's not a recipe for a bad idea.
For the top 1%. It's a common sentiment in a lot of games to balance around the top 1%, and I would dare say for most games, it's actually true. That's
actually, that automatically, by that one admission, you're already starting to dig your own grave. Because you have a lot of work to do to prove that we have any exception to that core concept. You have tons of work to do. Okay? Not work that you're going to be able to do in 6 minutes. That's for damn sure. You have a lot of work to do to prove that exception exists. Because most games, I mean, I still think the answer is 100%. But like, if you need to explain that concept. What game can't? Give me an example of something that's not Dead by Daylight. Oh wait, we talking about that fucking game with the dinosaurs? What that fucking shit called? Evolve? Fuck, here we go again with that shit. Already made that video about why top 1% balancing did not kill that game. Here we go again.
Best, most effective way to actually do it. Because in those scenarios, even if you balance for the top 1%, it's really not going to ruin the game for everybody else due to how, symmetrical games work. However, DBD is asymmetrical.
Well, what the fuck does that mean? Like, they have different objectives? Well, isn't like the fact that you do things like the asymmetrical wording and asymmetrical ideas can still be like, you know, our TCG is asymmetrical because they're trying to do different things. Like Disney's Villainous describes itself as asymmetrical. It's just a card game. Is Yu-Gi-Oh asymmetrical? Is Magic asymmetrical? Because the two, like, you're playing against somebody's deck that's trying to do something different to win the game. You know? So, like, what does that mean? And those games are balanced around the top 1%. Stall and Pokemon is trying to do something different than aggression and offense. They're trying to do something different. I mean, I guess you could say, oh, they're symmetrical because they're trying to KO all 6 of your Pokemon. But, like, those two, they have very different, like, strategies to the point where, like, they're barely trying to do the same thing. They're really not. Yeah, so like, that is that's a very, very clunky, reason to say that you can't. Because, like, that's the given. Asymmetrical, you can't do it because it's asymmetrical. What asymmetrical is, like, very, very, very cut and dry based on his position. It's because the one team's trying to escape and the other one's trying to kill you. That's why it doesn't work, is they're too asymmetrical. Whereas, yeah, TCG, sure, you're trying to, like, do something else, I guess. You're both trying to get the life points down to 0. Well, unless the guy's trying to get you with Exodia and Yu-Gi-Oh, then they're not trying to get your life points to 0. I don't know. That's vague. That's vague and dumb. I don't like that myself. That's just me rambling, though. That's not really a
Which
point.
means that any change that you make for one side is going to be drastically felt in a completely different and multitude of ways by another side. So the asymmetrical nature of DBD already invalidates those comparisons to the whole balancing around the top 1%.
Yeah, that's absolutely not true. That is absolutely not true. Because, again, Identity 5 doesn't listen. That's how Identity 5 continues to not listen. They continue to just ignore that and do it anyway, and it works. So there's no reason it can't work here. That's the ultimate argument against why the asymmetric argument is wrong. Because there's a game that does it, and it's fine. It literally works. They balance around what's happening at the tournaments, and it's fine. Like seriously. America, ladies and gentlemen, was talking about how bad Disciple was. Like all these tier lists, they had Disciple in C tier. Disciple's bad, Disciple's bad, Disciple's bad. That's what America said. Okay? Well, guess who was the MVP of Call of the Abyss this year? Disciple. She ain't getting nerfed now. Even if America still somehow doesn't see it, she's not getting nerfed now. She's obviously good. Okay? Because the top 1% proved it. She's not getting nerfed now because she MVP'd Koa. Now your ball's on your court. Get good. Is what the response to that is. Get good. You clearly just weren't playing her right now. She got a buff and people were saying she's still bad. No, she's not. No, she's not getting buffed. Is what I meant. She's fine. She's literally fine. And the top 1% proved it because they do it right. They do it right. We don't do it right here. We got all ass backwards playing this game. And the only quote unquote comp players we have are basement players. Fuck Oracle, bruh. Seriously, fuck Oracle. I'm so sick of hearing about fucking Oracle. Oracle is a group that got together and said, "Oh, well, we're pretty decent Swift, bro. Let's form a team." Who was no one's challenging them, bruh. They don't have a scene to work off of. Oh, they beat True Talent's Wraith. Who gives a shit? Any good Swift could beat True Talent's Wraith, bruh. Sorry about it. Any high MMR team is just capable of doing exactly what they do. If you want to say that they're impressive, they have to have balanced opponents, and they just don't have that right now, for real. That's a bad game.
It just doesn't really apply, at least to this game in particular. Maybe there are other games, but in this game in particular, it doesn't apply.
Yeah, but that one that's a clone of it applies to that one, just not to this one. See, that's why Identity 5 absolutely invalidates that whole thing, because it applies to maybe another game. Like the game that directly rips this one off, the clone of it. It applies to that one, but not this one.
And
sure,
a lot of that reason is if you try to make a blanket balancing change, you see the inherent flaw here. And that's because
Okay, here's the thing he's absolutely fucking wrong about, okay? This is the thing he's absolutely fucking wrong about. This thing right here.
in particular. Maybe there are other games, but in this game in particular, it doesn't apply. And a lot of that reason is like, if you try to make a blanket balancing change, you see the inherent flaw here. And that's because the actual power balance between killers, the disparity between the weakest and the strongest killer is so great that if you ever make a blanket change, like
Nice thread there,
just
Scott.
making gens
Good
take
God.
longer, a
Looking
change
like
where
me out
gens
there.
take longer, or you nerf Survive with Friends or whatever, you do something like that. Now, Clown at the highest level actually might have some type of chance. However, Nurse has the same chance, but now it's just even easier for her. And as
Okay, so now what he's arguing here is you can't do a core balance change. You can't buff the core killer, 115. You cannot buff that because that makes Nurse OP. Okay, that's what he's arguing.
long as you have a game with, killer powers that are so drastically different in terms of actual power, these kind of blanket changes, they can't really work because you'll always be fucking over some side. If you, nerf a mechanic for a killer, then no matter what you do, some side is always going to be affected in a really bad way. And I think the Clown example is probably what I want to stick with because, yeah, if you buff the actual overall killer experience by making gens take longer, then Nurse becomes too strong, and then Clown raises to, decently balanced. So,
Clown raises to decently balanced. Not only does Clown raise to be decently balanced, think about this. Not only does Clown raise to be decently balanced, but who else does? Everybody that's with him. So Legion, Myers, Demogorgon, Pig, Trickster, everybody that's down there with him, and then Plague. Did I say Demogorgon? Everyone that's down there with Clown towards the bottom, struggling because of a bad core, is now viable. Okay? And when you really think about that, that is definitely a good thing. That's a good thing, okay?
blanket changes like that can't work as long as there's that much of a skill or power disparity. Not skill, an actual design disparity in terms of the actual killer's power.
Okay, so when you really look at that, ladies and gentlemen, okay, we have a tier list, okay? We're talking about those bottom tiers, okay? However, this is what the problem is, okay? This man, if anyone's heard me talk about the idea of a keystone before, this man is using fucking Nurse as his keystone killer. This is the idea of the keystone killer is how you fix the balance, okay? He's using Nurse and Clown as his keystone killers, okay? It's like, oh, right now, the keystone killer for this game is Nurse, okay? Like, Nurse is the one who's viable, right? So like, Nurse is the keystone, but if you make everyone else, like, decently good against the Swift, okay, Nurse skyrockets, like the keystone then goes up here, okay? However, the keystone at being at the bottom would still be as bad because when you have the bottom tiers be the keystone, then you got, oh fucking shit, this is very, very generous, now you got like 7 characters that are OP, and then the rest of them can compete, okay? However, none of those are right because the keystone characters are the mid tiers. That's who the keystone characters are. Okay? You make the core changes until the keystone characters are viable. Okay? The keystone characters are the middle of the tier list. The Wraith, the Shitslinger, the Huntress, a Pyramid Head. Those 4 characters are the most important ones on the roster. Fucking Nemesis, add him in there. Those 5 mid-tier characters are probably the most important characters in the game, because those are who you're looking out for the viability. Those characters, in terms of the core. Once a Nemesis is viable, once a Pyramid Head is viable, then you're done with core mechanics. Not when a Clown is viable, then you went too far. When a Pyramid Head is viable, okay? Because then you have a 115 killer viable. Now we just need to buff Clown. Okay? Then you just need to buff Clown. You don't need to fucking continue to do the blanket changes. And then you have, and that actual disparity between killers, that's not even that real, bro. There's only 2 problem characters in the game. Okay, when you look at it from this perspective. Of course, when you look at it from the perspective of the status quo, there's no problem killers in the game because the status quo is so bad and you need everything you can do to beat Survivor. You need everything you can do to beat a 4-man Swift, to even tie them. Okay? You have 2 problem characters, 100%, 2 more potential problems in the Blight and the Twins. Okay? Nurse, Spirit, Blight, Twins. Those are your 4 characters that are a problem if you make 2 of them being Blight and Twins could potentially be a problem, but you have 2 characters that are a problem. So listen to this.
So that can't work. So the only way to actually do it is to individually balance the killers to be up to that level where they all have the same potential as Nurse. They all have the potential to beat
same
any team,
potential as Nurse. Nurse is your keystone character.
No matter what, no matter how good they are, as long as, the killer plays exceptionally well. And even assuming if behavior wanted to balance killers like that, which they very clearly don't, so already we're going into hypothetical territory here. Even saying that they did want to balance the game like that, and that was their goal, to balance for the top 1%, they want to make it so they bring all the killers up to Nurse's level, it's still, and this is kind of where I think the proof thing comes in, if we go by the current rate that behavior updates old killers and releases new killers, the universe will end before all of the killers are brought up to that level.
Okay, so now he's saying you have to buff every character to be up to the level of Nurse. So basically double S. So that means you have to buff everybody on the roster. So you're looking at 22 reworks combined with every one character every 4 months. Yeah, that takes too long. That's why you need the blanket changes. Okay, you make the blanket changes until the mid tiers are viable, and then once you make the mid tiers viable, okay. Again, there's only 2 characters in the game that are top tier, and there's 2 high tiers, and then there's upper mid, and then low mid, and then bottom, right? Once you make those upper mid/mid tier characters viable, there's enough disparity on the roster to where it's not really going to matter. And then those lower mid tiers are going to be more viable too. Those lower mid tiers, you make a Pyramid Head viable, you make Demogorgon's matchup against Survivors go from an 8-2 on the Survivor side, 10-0 on the Survivor side, to maybe a 6-4, which is not nearly as bad. Hell, Demogorgon has one of those powers to where if you make the core better, he might jump higher because of how he works and how he slows with the portals and the tracking. You make baseline killer viable, he might make a bigger jump. So you sit here, you make those core mechanics better to where a Pyramid Head and a Nemesis and a Wraith, they're actually viable against the top 1%. You have the characters like Oni, those high tiers, maybe upper mid tiers. The high tier characters in the game are Twins and Blight. Maybe you'll have to tone them down a little bit, but not with a base rework. Just if Oni gets too good, just take Scalp Top Knot away. I'm sure that'll fix him. Just rework some of them add-on values. You don't need to rework every single killer in the game. You just need to do the baseline mechanics. And then, once all those killers are viable and playable, then guess what? You have maximum 4 problem characters instead of 22. You have 2 mandatory problems in the Nurse and the Spirit, and then you have Blight and Twins who might also need hit if you ever make the core too good. Okay? 4 characters. And look at that, Scoot. That's not nearly as much as the 22 that you're suggesting. The 20 that you're suggesting. Not nearly as much. It's the keystone character idea. That's how you have to do it. The keystone. You look at your keystones, and when your keystones are viable, then you're done with core mechanics. You keep implementing core changes at a small enough value to where you can keep track of them and manage them, and you make one of these changes every other month. So you take out the long wall jungle gym tile and replace it with a very basic tile on each map, and then see what that does to the kill rates. All this can't happen without MMR. You need MMR here first. Then you take out the Bloodlust mechanic, then you start balancing around this idea of the keystone characters. You keep an eye on those mid-tiers, and then once those mid-tiers are averaging 2 kills a game, you're done with the core. Once those mid-tiers are averaging 2 kills a game at high MMR, you're done with the core. Okay? Then that's when you individualize it. You tweak some add-ons, nerf those 2 high tiers. That's what, nerf the 2 top tiers, that's when you do it. That's when you do all that. Seriously, bro, you want to talk about Spirit? Let's talk about Nurse, okay? Because that's the one he brings up in the video. Nurse doesn't get nearly enough shit in this game. Doesn't get nearly enough shit. You'll hear it from me first. Fuck the nurse, bruh. Fuck the nurse. Nurse definitely needs a rework. Nurse is the character that needs the rework, not the other ones. I have a great rework plan for her, bruh. You can definitely just play her like Geisha. Just turn her into a Geisha clone. She'd be great. Change the butterflies into orbs, and she's done. Make her 110, change the butterflies to orbs that she can teleport to, and you're done with her. Give her a new add-on kit that works with it. Increase the distance you throw the orb, blah, 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 blah. There's a rework idea there for her. You rework the nurse, rework the spirit. Those are your two characters that you'd hit once the core is fixed. See, again, this is me being a year and a half ahead of you, Wile E. Coyote. I'm already thinking about when MMR is working and doing its job, and we're starting to make the balance changes. What are we doing to the two characters that actually need the fucking reworks? Not the other characters, because those other characters don't need the rework. You need to 115, you need the core 115 killer to be viable. That helps your variety. Because right now, the four killers that are actually good at dealing with Swift right now, Spirit, Nurse, Blight, Twins, you know, those characters right there, none of them play like 115, except for Blight and Twins, who don't do it for very long, and the fact that they are 115 for even a little bit is why they're high tier and not top tier. Spirit and Nurse, they don't even play core killer. They don't even play it. That's why they're good. Once core killer is viable, then you can fucking work, or then you can, settle in and rework the two characters that actually fucking need it. So again, you're talking about reworking the entirety of the bottom roster. That's not what the top 1% balancing would be telling you to do. Top 1% balancing is telling you to get rid of the nurse and get rid of the spirit. Okay? But again, that's not the step we're doing first. You don't just rip nurse and spirit out of the game prematurely before they're ready to go. First, you have to fix the fucking maps. That's what you do first. You have to fix the fucking maps, take out the fucking bloodlust, announce the nerfs are coming, but you need the people, disable them. Or fuck, you know what, I'm even willing to compromise. Rework them first to take them out of the game. So you are only focused on 115 killer. Only focused on 115 killer. But again, this is something you have to do around the competitive top 1%.
Because at the same rate that they update old killers, they bring in a new killer who is not as good as Nurse. So no matter what, it's just as soon as they bring one in, they replace it, then bring one in, then replace it. But
well, you know what? We took off of maps for an entire year. Okay? We took off this police department map that we haven't gotten to play on because it's out of the game right now is the first map for an entire year. Take a year off of killers. Take a year off. But again, you wouldn't need to take a year off if you just bounced around the top 1%. And took the real problem characters out.
Unless every killer right now is currently at that level, it will never happen because it's just a one-to-one. It replaces it. And this is even assuming the changes they make when they update these killers are good. Or we could have a clown situation where the buff is basically nothing and he's still shit.
Okay. The buff that Clown got actually got him out of bottom 5. Okay, the buff is bad. Yeah, the buff was horrible. But again, he's one of those characters that once 115 goes up, he might make a bigger jump than you think he will. Because the only reason the Clown sucks is because 115 doesn't work. 115 doesn't work. Who's to say that Clown's anti-looping properties go up in value as soon as 115 works again? Like, you don't really know this stuff until you actually try it. Demogorgon, again, Demo's being one of those characters. Demo's actually the character who I theorize would make the biggest jump if 115 worked. Once 115 works, you do not know who's going to be good because of the complexity of some of these powers. Once 115 is better, a full heal against Plague in the mid-game would may be more desirable, which would cause Corrupt Purge to see more play. Like, you know what I'm saying? That makes Plague better. You never know on some of this stuff. Like, once 115 is working and at a good state, it will affect the game in a bigger state than people realize. Because right now, 115 doesn't work. It doesn't. And that's one of the biggest distinctions that Identity 5 has over this game. When you're Identity 5 walking around as a killer with no power, that is slightly more viable. Okay? It's not entirely viable, and like Hell Ember shows that it is limiting. But, like, it is more viable than it is in Dead by Daylight. Once the core is better, so you have to implement the core fucking changes first. that get 115 viable, get the pyramid head viable. Okay, you can buff the other low tiers later, and again, they wouldn't need reworks. I really don't think they'd need reworks. That's the big distinction there. Not every killer in the game is going to need a Freddy buff if you make 115 viable. Why do that option when it's so slow when you could just nerf the fucking survivors and buff the killers? You have some really cool character design already in the game. With, like, again, Demo, for instance. Demo is a character, I give him a lot of shit on this channel, but he is a character that on paper is really, really cool, but he doesn't work because of 115. He doesn't work because of 115. He travels across the entire map, he places the portals, and then he can go anywhere. He has good map control. But he doesn't have good map control because he can't down. That's his problem. He cannot down. Since he cannot down, he doesn't have enough time to do what he's trying to do. Who else is there? Pig? Pig can't play the game because you have to down someone to get the trap on them. Once the traps become more reliable, Pig gets out of the fucking bottom tier. Because the fact that she can't down is what makes her bottom tier, not the traps RNG. The fact that she can't fucking down anybody. She can't fucking down. A trickster can't fucking down. These characters are bad because they can't fucking down. Plague cannot down. No one can down you when you're top level. Except for the 4 characters that have a slight hope in hell at it. Nurse, Spirit, Blight, and Twins. Those are the only 4 characters that can potentially fucking down you, realistically. Without losing. Everybody else should just be gen rushed. Because even though a doctor can down you, it takes a little too much time to do so. Again, doctor, there's another one who goes up as soon as the map is fair. Like, for real. So that's your main problem. So basically everything in this video is wrong. Because the core changes are what you need to be doing. But again, he was talking about the fucking core changes to make the clown good. To make the clown viable. To make the clown, like, on the same level as Nurse. Yeah, that's not going to happen. But and plus, viability and power disparity is a natural consequence of variety. Okay? We've talked about this before on your videos, Scoot. You're always going to have fluctuating levels of power. Not every character is going to receive a buff. Okay? Look at Smash, for instance. Lucas has been bad since Ultimate came out. They're never going to buff him because he's not horrible. When you have a roster of 75 characters, Lucas is just bad. And he's never going to be buffed. That's just how it works, because he's not bottom of the bottom barrel. Once you get in the groove of things, like you don't need to buff every killer on the roster. You are allowed to have bad characters in a video game. That's not what anybody is saying. That's not what anyone's arguing. Of course there's going to be weak and bad killers. But the problem is that there's only 2 viable ones that can actually tie, and then there's 2 others that have a chance of tying you, sometimes. That's what the problem is, bruh. The problem is, after the 20th bad character, it gets kind of old, and we need to start thinking about the core adjustments. However, once that core is hit, and the mid-tiers are viable, you're done with the core. You're done with it. Then maybe you just go, okay, here, clown. Here, you can have that hindered on base and see what that does for you. Once the core is fixed, the specific killer changes come easier.
So, at the current rate that behavior updates killers and releases new killers, it is impossible for every killer to get to that level. So you can't do a blanket thing because that'll, exacerbate the disparity in power between the killers.
It really won't. Because, again, there's only 2 characters that are in the S tier. Okay? You're allowed to have power disparity. That is allowed to exist. Like Scoot thinks I want, and you want, every character in the S tier. That is absolutely not true. That's not true. If I go in there and play as Trickster, I'm accepting that I'm playing garbage. I am. And it's not likely that Trickster will ever be good. And that's not what I'm asking. I'm not asking for Trickster to be good. I'm asking for Trickster to be viable in pub matches. Like, at top level, Trickster doesn't ever have to be viable. That doesn't have to happen. But it would be nice for me to go into a match as Trickster and think the character design makes sense. He should be capable of beating pubs. which right now, at high MMR, he should be capable of beating pubs at high MMR. Not at the ranking system. The ranking system sucks titties. The ranking system is giving me players of low MMR and their red rank. We want MMR for the matchmaking. So we know that's what we need here. There's allowed to be fluctuating levels of power.
And individually balance all the killers as well, because at the same rate that they balance them, a new weaker killer comes out, or not even weaker killer, a new killer that's just simply not, the absolute top tier comes out. And so you have a never-ending cycle of it just never actually.
Yeah, if you do my idea, the number of reworks you have is on a timer, and that it'll get fixed. That's why this whole thing doesn't really work. That cycle he's talking about just doesn't exist if you do it right. But again, you need to do it around the high caliber gameplay. You need to do it around the high MMR. This stuff will only get revealed once MMR is in the game. Because right now you can pick anybody and win because the whole thing's a fucking disaster. Okay? I think I've made my point. I don't really want to watch the next 2 minutes. This man just jumbles around and repeats himself quite a bit. That's the main point, though. You do the blanket fixes until the keystone character is viable. I need to make a separate idea covering the keystone in much more detail. But that's the basic premise right there. It's not the clown, it's the pyramid head and the huntress. Those and the Deathslinger and the Wraith, and like once True can go in as once True Talent can play 10 games against Oracle, in quotes. I mean, I don't like Oracle, but for lack of a better fucking representation of good Swift. Once True Talent can play Oracle 5 times as the Wraith and win, you're done with core changes, ladies and gentlemen. The game's core is fine, the other killers just need something. And not even something little, because you're allowed to have non-viable characters in a video game. Okay? That's it. And all that happens around the high caliber teams. You need to do it around the top 1%, or the game's just going to be stagnant. And once MMR comes in, the entire game will feel the ripple effect of this balance problem. The entire game. Killer Apocalypse is coming, and this is the last video you needed before it is here. Once Killer Apocalypse gets here, this man will never be able to win as Demogorgon again. Check out his high MMR Demogorgon video if you'd like to see that, because that's every fucking game in his future when he's playing garbage like that. Alright, I'm getting the hell out of here, lads. G fucking G. Come on, Scoot. You gotta do better, bruh. You gotta do better before high MMR comes out and kicks you in the ass. You gotta do better. I'm out of here. GG's.